The biggest challenge is like if somebody says like, you know what, yeah, that number works. Let's kind of move forward. If we don't intend on purchasing the property ourselves, like, okay, how do we dispo this? What's the proper way? Obviously, you went over how we can pull a list of who's bought similar properties, and that's kind of easy. But just wondering, is it worth going out, kind of shaking hands, putting eyes on a property, putting a sales sheet together, or something like that?
The short answer is always it is a positive thing to go see a property. I always believe that that is a positive thing. However, there's also from two different perspectives, right? So if I take a sheet of paper and I have a line down the middle and there's two different sides of this coin, I'm going to talk about both, okay? I'm going to first
Yeah,
talk about the wholesaler side, just from the wholesaling lens, and then I'm going to talk about the broker lens on the side.
cool.
Because there's kind of two lenses that I see this through. Wholesaling lens. I'm just going to write this down to make sure we don't lose train of thought. So 1 second. Wholesale. And we have broker. If you have a deal and you're making your calls and you find out that a seller really, again, both scenarios, that the seller's willing to agree to a fair and reasonable price. What the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to call up some VIPs of mine. I'm going to call up my VIP list and I'm going to hit them with this deal. I want to get feedback. I want my feedback loop to happen as quickly as freaking possible. And by the way, this is the same circumstance on a lot of leads that we get. Whether, it's wholesaling or broker, I want to get feedback as fast
Right.
as freaking possible from my VIPs. But I want to be very clear. I'm only talking like 1, 2, or 3 people. Like this is very tight knit. Only people I trust. Whether I'm going to wholesale it or I'm going to broker it, I need to have some feedback as fast as possible. Am I anywhere near the ballpark I actually believe I am? I need feedback on that. I mean, it's nice to have, let's just say 2 wholesalers' thoughts or 2 brokers' thoughts, but like you need an end buyer to say, yes, I would actually transact at X. Because if we go the wholesale route specifically, there are wholesalers that I work with, even in the commercial world, where they like to lock things up no matter what.
Okay.
They don't like marketing it. They don't like doing anything. There's no call. There is no call to VIPs. There's no any of that. They want to lock up the deal, put down a deposit of 500, 1,000, 5,000 bucks or whatever. Take all the pictures to go through some due diligence and pre-screen the deal before they pitch it out. There are some wholesalers that do that. Me, on the other hand, I don't like doing that. I don't like wasting money. I don't want to lock up a deal when I have absolutely zero feedback. I like hearing feedback as fast as possible. Now, look. Is it more risky because I don't have the deal locked up? 100%. Of course, it is more risky. So if it's in your backyard and you guys are like, no question, this deal is a good deal, I probably would say there's no harm, no foul of just locking a deal up, right? And trying to go straight to PSA, right? But if it's not just in your backyard, street, perfect type of property, all day long slam dunk, it's like a 30 unit deal in your backyard for 700 grand, right? Right? If it's not like that and it's like anything else normal that we typically all deal with, where it's like possibly a really good opportunity, possibly a decent one, right? Where, you don't know how much of a spread you have. I like to just have a list of VIP buyers, which yes, I highly recommend every single person here on this call is building that VIP list before they even, before they start pitching it, right? Like you're not going to just call up some random schmuck buyer who bought something previously who you have no relationship with and throw them a deal.
Right.
I would
Right.
recommend you have it locked up. Given the circumstances, and again, I just talk from my experience, I like to just have a few people in my pocket who I've done deals with in the past that I can go and say, hey, I got this deal. It's 30 units. The guy wants 2.7 million bucks. The rent's a little bit low, so it's a day 1.5 cap, but the price per unit is unfreaking believable, right? Or whatever it is. And maybe I'm pitching it to him at 3.5 million because I have it at 2.7 or something. You got to
Yeah.
get. And I'm pitching them this opportunity that I have right now just to get my feedback. Now,
Yeah.
let's just say the guy says, look, 3.5 million, that's a freaking steal. Let's lock it up right away. Like there's so much positive energy. And you hear that not just once, but all 3 times you talk to a VIP buyer, or as many times as you have one. Everyone's giving you green lights. You're like, awesome. I would immediately lock that into a PSA, like immediately, as fast as you possibly can. If everybody's a green light, lock it into a PSA. Lock them into a PSA. I typically even like to have my buyer sign a PSA before I even sign my own, right? So it's like I'll get my, or an LOI even, right? I'll have a buyer sign an LOI, show me proof of funds. Like obviously if you trust them, you don't really need stuff like that. But, I want to make sure they're vetted as much as you possibly can. Get your buyer to sign an LOI before you even go into contract. But as long as you know you can execute, I don't mind doing that. I'll do that. And again, you're the seller. So make sure you always realize like, hey, like, when you're writing the letter of intent for that buyer, you're the seller, then you become the buyer on the other side. I just have it in an LLC that I have created, and none of that's really that big of an issue. Let's talk about brokering this for a second. If I'm on the broker side, which my lens shifts very quickly, which is basically, let's just say, we have a deal that the seller's willing to take 2.7 and I can flip it for 3.5. If every single person I call, same process, it doesn't matter if it's the deal is at 2.7 and we can make 6, 7, 800 grand or whatever it is, or if the seller's willing to take 3.3 or 3.4, I'd be going at 3.5, let's just say, to my guys, and I'm getting feedback, and the feedback comes back as it's only worth, let's just say, the guy wants 2.7, the guy says 3.5 is way too freaking high. I can maybe make sense at 3 million, maybe I can do 2.8, 2.9, somewhere in that range. I'm immediately shifting my mindset. This is why I like getting the feedback loops, because I want to know before I waste anybody's time, anybody's money. Like, again, unless it's like so stupid clear, like even the deal I was just talking about in the live calling session, this deal for 1.5 million. I talked to 3 or 4 or 5 great buyers at 1.9 was the pitch price. So I pitched it at 1.9 and I had the feedback come back from a bunch of people between 1.6 or 1.65, sorry, 1.65. I have locked at not locked, but the seller's willing to agree at 1.5. And by the way, this 1.9 guy gave me a letter. This is what happens. There's some challenges that occur, right? The guy at 1.9 gave me an LOI, signed an LOI at 1.9. I signed an LOI at 1.5. We get into attorney review and then the guy back, went to go see it, spent all this time, energy, and effort doing some digging, and came back at 1.4 million. Even though I was like, oh wow, we were to make $400,000. That's not what happened. Again, in that scenario, of course, you don't just take a 6-point broker fee, you lock it up and try to make 400 grand. Again, it doesn't mean that, it's not foolproof, right? There's due diligence and other things, and I had to work through that and it didn't work out. Now, I do have a backup buyer, 167, but what I'm even trying to do now is that if I can work on terms that are agreeable at the 1.5 number with seller financing and all that crazy jazz, maybe I can get someone to pay even more money on this deal, right? Instead of this 167 guy who needs, 300 days to close. I mean, I don't know why he wants so much time to close. I might be able to, either I'll do the deal myself because I think there's actually truly a lot of upside in this deal. I know this market. I'd be risking 300 grand, right? But I do believe there's a lot of upside in this market. I can go through the eviction process, whatever, or I can just straight wholesale it to somebody else and say, hey, it's it's 1.5 at 20% down, like I told him, which is 300. So I'll just tell somebody else it's 500 down or 600 down, and the guy's willing to hold 1.2 and give him 12 months of seller financing at 5% interest only, which no one is going to be able to beat for the most part, right? I mean, it's 35% down with 5% interest only for 12 months. It's not bad. Anyways, so it's very deal dependent, and no matter what, it's always the most important piece is that feedback loop, and you want it as fast as freaking possible so you don't waste time, similar to we just experienced on the very last call with Julie. By the way, it happens to me all the time, Julie, so we are not alone, right? It's just those types of situations where we have a seller who goes, I want 3 million or screw off, and they just have no actual understanding of what the true value of their property is, especially right now where interest rates are 7 and change percent. I mean, look, funny enough, I was actually just sent a deal. I was just sent a deal from somebody they wanted me to look at, and the deal, they had an exit cap rate. They're trying to raise money or sell the portfolio. They have an exit cap rate on it of 4.5%. Nothing's selling for 4.5%. Nothing. Unless Blackstone's buying it, which it's not a Blackstone deal. And even still, Blackstone's paying 5.5s pretty much all the time. Like, they're not stupid, or no one's paying a 4.5 cap. So it's like they're looking at it. And by the way, just to give you an understanding, if they had a 6.5 cap metric, which is normal right now, right? Like a 6.5 cap is a reasonable number for these larger investment funds to buy a brand new construction anything. On a 6.5 cap, there is zero profit on this deal. Nothing. It's actually negative. It's a negative deal. So it's like you would lose money if it sold for a 6.5 cap. And they're trying to say, oh, we're going to make 10 million in profit because we're going to sell for a 4.5 cap. I'm like, okay, so if you sell for anything less than a 4.5 cap, it's dangerous. This is why it's very important to understand and get the feedback loops as fast as possible. And this guy who sent me the deal about pot, and he was going to invest $1 million in this deal. I'm like, you just don't know. Yeah. Right? So I immediately build a strong VIP list of people who buy these types of, any type of product you come across where you can go, hey, this is what I got. This is the price. Now you'll upsell it. You'll, do whatever you need to do spread wise and see where their heads are at. But even like the deal I had for 12 million where that guy was super, you heard that combo?
Yeah.
I have that deal pitched right now at 13 million. Yeah. Now I had one guy of the few VIPs that I put it in front of him. One of the guys came back and said 11. That's not positive, right? That's a red light. So I'm not locking this thing up at 12 by any means, right? So one's at 11, and the other two guys haven't got back to me, which, again, if it's a great deal, they'll typically get back to you pretty damn quick. So anyways, that saves me right? Like so much time, energy, and effort where like, and by the way, the vast majority of deals are nowhere near this even thinking process. Where like most of the time it's nowhere near and I can go out to, regular market and just pitch it as an off-market listing as an example. There's the few and far between ones that are close, right? Where they could be really good deals. Like I have this one deal right now that I've been working on for a long time, seller leaseback situation, warehouse. I'm buying it for like, I don't know, $120 a foot or something like that. Market's like 180 a foot, maybe 185 a foot. I'm going to be locking it up for 2.75 million. They promised me a triple net lease. Then they gave, so I was like possibly going to flip it for $400,000. And then they came back and said that, okay, it's actually not a triple net lease. We don't want to pay for any exterior maintenance. There's a lot of fucking exterior maintenance on this deal, like a ton of it. So I'm like, okay, well, that kills my deal because then all of a sudden that's $30,000 a year, in expense ratio that I have to take off the top, right? Because of all these things that need to be repaired, which I don't want to be responsible for. So all of a sudden it went from me flipping it at an 8 cap, right, at 2.4, and making 400,000 based on my price to now, I'm barely paying an 8 cap. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I would rather just broker it and make $100,000 and call it a day. So it's really having those feedback loops as fast as you possibly can with people you trust who can give you offers right away.
Cool. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, you got it. Alec, next in line.
I was just going to piggyback off what he was saying. What if you don't have those VIP buyers? Now
it's time to build that list, right? Or use somebody like myself, right? Like that's the purpose of these trainings, right? Like come on here and say like, hey, I've got this, right? And I'll give you feedback immediately. Any deal across the country, I'll take a good look. I mean, like there's a lot of think about it, guys. Most deals across the country all have the same similar metrics when it's a green light deal. You know what I mean? For the most part, the basis is really good. So again, great price per square foot or great price per unit if it's multifamily. If the cap rates very good day one, that means you have a high cash and cash day one, and there's lots of upside. If you have that, check, and the market is not D, right, and it's not a D class market, it's at least a B, it's going to be really hard to not be able to make money on that. But if you have every one of those check marks, again, you have too high of a basis, pretty low cap, and and not a lot of value add upside, it's just not worth the time, energy, and effort. And obviously, what we'll try to do is that if we know that, let's just say we have a deal that's mid-range, the vast majority of all deals, right? Like we have deals that let's just say top of the range, which is super good, you might wholesale it and make $1 million. Then you have the 80 or 90% of all leads that we have, which are just mid-range deals, okay? There's not an unbelievable amount of spread. It may be decent. The cap rate's okay, right? There's maybe a little bit of value add. The basis is basically market, maybe a smidge under. The vast majority of deals we come across, okay? Every single time, I'll still make an offer 100% of the time to gauge price. Maybe there's a little bit more negotiation. And then 100% of the time after my LOI, and we want a counter of some sort that's a little bit lower than what they had said before, if anything, I immediately go to the market. I immediately pull the list of 50 buyers in the local market, and I will call every single one of them. And I will pitch the deal.